Hi, I'm Tammy Erickson. We've all seen ways that things are beginning to change in the way we work, where we work, the kinds of processes we use, the way we interact with our colleagues. What I'd like to do today is to share with you the kind of research that I've done to understand the fundamental ways that work will change in the future. I'm going to share 10 ways that the future will be different than what it's been in the past. I'd also like to talk a bit about why that future is now. It's not something we can think about long term. It's something we need to begin today. To start, let me ask you to think about the kinds of companies that you admire deeply today. What is it that they do particularly well? What do you think makes them stand out from their competition? From my observation, it's companies who do things like have wonderful ways of understanding what their customers need and responding to them very quickly. It's companies who are able to change from one way of doing things to another. It's those that are able to use data in ways that really add value to the purchase of whatever service or product they're offering. I call these kinds of activities mobilizing intelligence. And I believe they're the most important kind of work today. These mobilizing intelligence activities, whether it's around innovating, curating, collaborating, customizing, experimenting, sensing, these activities are the ones that set companies apart. And the reality is, even though we hear about things like the pandemic and new technologies, artificial intelligence, changing demographics, all kinds of trends, all of which are important. The most fundamental change in work today is the rising importance of these activities. This work is now. And when we think about the future of work, a simple way to think about it is that the future of work is nothing more than the way we embrace the importance of mobilizing intelligence. Now, in the past, success often depended on being able to make a lot of product very efficiently. And practices were developed that were perfect for those kinds of ways of competing. Practices like having command and control authority. One person would make a decision and cascade it down the organization. We had a lot of focus on efficiency and particularly utilization metrics. That was big in most industries. We measured productivity as a unit of time. We had bureaucratic structures that were designed to allow multiple inputs from multiple directions, lots of people providing their perspectives. And we wanted to keep everyone in perfect alignment. We didn't want any individuals who were moving out in a different direction. So we put in place lots of rules to keep everybody in line. We had a bit of a win-lose, zero-sum philosophy. Now, here's the thing. These practices are brilliant if what you want to do is compete on the basis of scale and efficiency. Make a lot of stuff inexpensively and consistently. But if you want to compete on the basis of mobilizing intelligence, these practices will kill it. The reality is activities related to mobilizing intelligence require very different structures, cultures, and processes. And that's the essence of the future of work. The most important thing to think about when you think about mobilizing intelligence is that this is something that only happens if people want it to. The individuals in your organization have to choose to care and to think. They have to dig deep in order to provide their very best efforts to help you innovate, collaborate, sense. The bottom line is individuals' willingness to invest their own discretionary effort is what's going to make or break the success of your company. And accepting that fact, getting over the idea that you can be the heroic leader coming in with all the answers, is the first important step in moving forward to the future of work. Now, let's look at some of the things that we need to do in order to adapt to a world of mobilizing intelligence, one where we're creating organizations where people want to work there, want to care, choose to think. Here are some. The first in the future of work is that organization designs, that is the structures we create, are going to maximize options. Because options are what allow people to change from one way of doing things to another quickly. They give the people in your organization choices. It's not enough to teach your executives how to think agilely. You have to create organizations that have agility built in. And that's about options. It's the ability to change easily and quickly. And it's the flexibility to coordinate exactly what you need with exactly when you need it. Now, there are two simple ways to do that, to keep in mind. One is you should own less. And the second is you should plan less. Because both of those activities lock you in to longer term decisions. They create fewer options. If you own less and in a sense, rent more, you have more flexibility to change from one thing to another. If you plan less and instead rely on coordination, in other words, letting people know in the moment what you need, where you need it, you again have the flexibility to match your demand to the specific supply at the time. It's all about getting exactly what you need, when you need it, and where you need it. The second element of the future of work comes through the way that we'll create value. In the past, value was largely created inside a company's boundaries. We bought raw materials, we added value to those raw materials, and we sold them on to a marketplace. That's still going to be part of what's all about. Obviously, we need to make things. But the highest level of value is increasingly going to come through connections. It'll come through our ability to shift from adding value to the assets we own to creating valuable platforms where we connect together people, goods, and the intelligence that adds value to that transaction, where we match supply and demand, where we provide mechanisms to rate and curate the value of the transaction and create a sense of trust. The third element of the future of work is maybe the most provocative of all. Most work in the future will be organized by project. Intelligence activities, things where we value adaptability and innovation, which comes basically by bringing new ideas together, thrive in multifunctional project-based units where we can bring in exactly the right resources for the particular work that's being done. In the past, industrial operations where we wanted efficiency and scale were very well suited to fixed physical units, functional groups, departments, offices organized by geography. We're going to be moving away from those entities. They may still serve as home bases for people, but when we actually get together to do work, more and more of our work will be pulling people from a variety of sources and putting them together in a team or project specifically designed to do that task. That has several advantages. First of all, it allows us to optimize the resources for each task, but it gets even a bit further out than that. As we get better at it, what we will start to do is think about the economic value of each project, and we will pay by project rather than by time. We will begin to make relevant, realistic assessments about the quality of the output, including the timeliness, was it done on time, but not the actual elapsed time that was taken to do the project or the utilization rate that implies. Those measures are not relevant in an intelligence-based world. One of the other advantages of a project-based organization is it allows individuals to have more choice. And this plays well to our evolving demographics. Younger people today, in particular, want to be able to make their own decisions. And so companies will begin to create systems that allow people to bid on work, on the projects they'd like to take on, based on their own personal priorities and preferences. Some people may choose based on the amount of time required, or the degree of difficulty, or the skill they want to learn, or, as we begin to build it in more and more, on the compensation desired. Those kinds of things will be in the hands of the individual. And as corporations, we no longer have to worry about managing work-life balance. We give people choices and allow them to manage their own. A fourth element of the future of work is how we govern things. I bet all of us took classes in school at some point that talked about the importance of cascading through an organization. The fundamental inherent idea was that somebody at the top would make a decision and would come up with ways to tell everybody else what that decision was and the ways in which they should comply with what's already been decided. That idea is simply not practical in an intelligence-based world. It can't be done. You're not going to have some one person at the top making the decision and telling everyone else. For one thing, you would greatly limit your ability to sense and flex and create the kind of experiences your customers on the ground actually want. And so organizations will shift to governing through what I call simple rules for decision making. In other words, they'll teach people how to make decisions, the criteria to use to make decisions, and then turn them loose to make those decisions themselves. This, by the way, is the practical approach when somebody says to you, you should empower your people or you should delegate more. I don't frankly know what those words would mean in the abstract. But if I tell you you should teach people how to make decisions, I hope that provides a more useful way to think about the idea of empowerment or delegation. And along with that, the overriding goal should be to create what I call a community of adults, people who relate to each other as though we're all intelligent adults. That means eliminating a lot of the so-called schoolhouse rules, when to show up, what to do, what to wear, etc. Treat people like an adult if you want them to behave like adults. Let them think. Let them take independent initiative. And if you find you have an outlier who simply cannot act like an adult, well, you'll have to get rid of that individual. But that's a lot better than making rules to govern everyone else. Deal with the exception. Don't put rules over the majority. The fifth element of the future of work is how people will be attracted and retained by organizations. Increasingly, that attraction and retention will come through the promise of human asset appreciation. You know, we've talked about human capital for several decades now, but I don't think we've done a lot about it. And what's happening today and will happen increasingly is a shift from talking about current cash, in other words, the salary I'm paying you today, to how much your value will appreciate if you work in our organization, how much you'll learn, how many skills you'll gain, and frankly, how the reputation of our organization will attach itself to you, making you more valuable in the marketplace. Everyone wants security, but security is no longer tied to tenure. Nobody believes that. Security comes in the form of multiple skills, the ability to do a lot of different things, or frankly, to get a new job if the one you have now doesn't work out. And so you should be attracting and retaining talent by offering to increase people's commercial value. And I'm a big believer in making that tangible by giving them what I like to euphemistically call badges. Now, to create badges, you need to translate your skills in your organization into a logical progression. Here, I've given you an example of learning how to juggle. So to learn to juggle, you first learn to catch a ball in both hands. Then you learn to catch it in your dominant hand. Then you learn to catch it in your less dominant hand and to throw it back and forth between the two. That's a logical progression that you can see. And that's the kind of logic that you need to apply to the skills in your organization. Look for those demonstrated accomplishments. I'm not at all a fan of the judgmental kinds of assessments where we ask people to rate each other on whether they're collaborative or innovative. Those things are virtually meaningless, but demonstrating specific skills are extremely helpful. And by the way, you should always discuss these kinds of things with your employees in 2-year increments. Don't talk about what's going to happen in 5 years or 10 years. Talk about what they'll learn and how much their value will increase if they work in your organization over the next 2 years. If you want them to stay 20 years, it's pretty straightforward. Have 10 conversations teed up to have with that individual. The sixth element of the future of work will be the addition of robust new processes that we haven't seen in most companies in the past. Businesses are going to create ways for everyone in their organization to have access to lots of information, disruptive information about new trends, new customer requirements, challenges that are occurring in the marketplace. Leaders need to think about exposing their organization, top to bottom, to external information and about embracing diversity of thought in all forms. Importantly, leaders need to schedule sessions where people can make sense out of that, can think together. And by the way, one of the things the pandemic has taught us is that companies who created these sessions, even virtually, have had a big advantage. As a leader, you need to hold the conversation open so that everyone's ideas can be heard and carefully considered. The seventh one, I don't know, you may not like. The seventh element of the future of work is that work will be interesting. I have a lot of executives say, oh, I can't do that. It's not possible. Work is fundamentally boring, a lot of it. Sorry, you're going to have to find a way to make work interesting because people will only invest their best in tasks that they perceive to be challenging and important. And here are 2 tips for making the work in your organization more interesting. The first is to describe the work as a question. And the most effective form is how might we? How might we take this technology and address this customer need? How might we be more flexible in the way we respond to this customer demand? Bring people in, challenge their minds so that they're helping you think of a solution in addition to executing on the answer. And encourage experimentation. You want to combat this sense of everything has to be analyzed or committees have to meet to decide. Let people try things and bring a bit of fresh air into the organization. The 8th element is create the ability for ideas to flow easily and quickly in all directions. So it's no longer about ideas flowing up to the top and then being sent back down somewhere else. A job of a leader is to make sure you have a very comprehensive, what I like to call collaborative capacity. In other words, networks that run in all directions in your organization. Do an informal network analysis if you haven't already. Help people figure out who they need to know in order to do their work well. And then invest time in strengthening relationships. Have technology that makes it easy to do that. The ninth element of the future of work is something that Peter Drucker predicted probably 20 years ago. He told us then that we were moving to a volunteer workforce, and that future is now. The workers will increasingly hold the cards, and they have to choose you. I like to say meaning is the new money. You have to create a sense of what it means to be part of your organization that is so compelling and powerful that people want to join. So understand what it is that you can realistically promise and make sure you deliver on that promise. Design rituals that reinforce why people have chosen to join your organization. Make it special. And one tip is do it particularly strongly at the very beginning. In fact, I would say somewhat jokingly, try to scare people away. So tell them all the terrible things about working in your organization right during the interview process. And if they still say, I'd like to be part of it, well, you've hooked them. You have gotten them to opt in. And the final element of the future of work is, what does the person at the top do? What is a leader? A leader's job in this environment is basically to create a context, to curate a culture, to shape the kind of environment where talented people will choose to join and choose to do great work. Leaders will increasingly be judged and selected by criteria associated with the context they create. Do other people want to work with them? Do their teams have a sense of passion and commitment? Do new ideas emerge? And are people more valuable after they've been working with them? This is the role of the leader going forward as we move to the future of work. So here you have it, 10 elements of the future of work. All of them important ways to begin to address the ability to mobilize intelligence. If you can do these things, you'll be able to be more innovative, collaborative, and shape your organization in new ways. I hope these ideas will help you. The sun, as you can see, is on the horizon, but it's coming up fast. So now is the time to move forward to the future of work.